Well, let's get the view of Alpesh Patel, who's a fund manager. He also runs his own business, Profinium Partners. Alpesh, so we have seen a degree of reaction already with the pound weakening. Apart from that, though, much other reaction, do you think, to this? No, because, first of all, it had been expected that there was a significant risk of this happening, just the timing that was variable. But also, let's not forget the good news of this is that British exports become cheaper. And if we're looking for some way of growth at a time of austerity where the government's very clear that they don't want to increase spending, then exports is clearly one way to go. So a weakening sterling is actually good news in that regard, and I should think that it's good news for the government, although they couldn't say that they were looking for a weaker currency. That never sounds good. But also, don't forget, this is not a problem with sterling necessarily. It's the fact that the euro is stronger because of how pessimistic we were last year in the euro. So there's a positive reaction generally to people buying euros because they'd felt that had been pushed too low. And also, given the American growth story, there's a positive story with the United States. So it's actually the fact that the euro and the dollar are more attractive than it is a story that sterling or Britain is less attractive.
What about the issue then of where the pound may head in the future? Because you've got those who are speculating, as we said, you know, we're looking at 135 for the pound dollar, which would be a big fall, wouldn't it? I mean, do you think that's over-exaggerated?
I think it is over-exaggerated, not least because, whilst you mentioned July 2010, and it's the weakest we've been since then, if you move back another 12 months to that, well, actually it was £1 to $2, not long before that. I think it was about 2008, 2009. So, of course, these things are incredibly volatile, and I don't see a downward trend continuing with sterling. In actual fact, I'd anticipate that now that this news has come out, we might get maybe 48 hours of downward pressure on sterling, and then you'll start to see some reaction upwards because it's already in the markets, it's in the news, and there's no new extra news flow off the back of it.
All right, Alpesh, thank you very much. Alpesh will return in about 10 minutes when he talks us through today's newspaper stories. But let's now squeeze in more business.
Well, Alpesh is here with us and is going to go through the papers with us this morning. Morning, Alpesh.
Hi, Ben Affleck just tweeted me to say good luck for the
the paper review. those two women. All right, well, let's start with the issue that you've been discussing with Sally already in World Business Report, but the UK economy having been placed on negative watch by Moody's, does it matter?
Well, I tell you why it does matter, but as a good news story. If you look at the French cost of borrowing and the American cost of borrowing when they were downgraded, actually their cost of borrowing fell afterwards because the broader markets are no longer looking at these rating agencies the way they once did, not least because they got it so wrong before the credit crunch and never gave us any warning beforehand. So the credibility of Moody's and Standard & Poor's is that much less than it's ever been. But also because, as I say, we're at a 350-year low in terms of how much it cost the British government to borrow money. So even if the cost of borrowing went up a little bit, I think we can manage, given how low historically it is in any event. So it does matter, but actually is a good news story.
All right, well, let's move on swiftly because the AAA has had a lot of coverage, hasn't it? If we look at this story, I have to say, no big surprise to me. The Independent saying that a fifth of the British public are failing to save any money. Now, this is talking about a Scottish widow's annual savings and investment report. It's kind of picking that apart. I mean, we've never been savers, have we? We've always been told we need to save more, we need to put some money away for when we retire.
The timing of this report is so frustrating. I mean, the reason these companies do this is it's a marketing stunt to get you to save more. Of course, one would say there's absolutely nothing wrong with saving more. The thing is, that's fine when we're in the middle of a boom and saying to people, look, put some away for a rainy day. In the middle of austerity cuts, where jobs are under threat, where cost of living is going up, I'm sure people would love to save more. And benefits going down. I'm sure people would love to save more if only they could. So all this does is not only remind us that that we're not saving, largely because we don't have the capacity to save anymore. It's not because we're all spending on the high street. We know that's not the case. It's not because we've got more room on our credit cards to max those out. It's the fact of the matter is it's just simply trying to make ends meet is why we can't save anymore. So thanks for making us feel better, Independent.
But as you alluded to earlier, Sal, I mean, here in the UK, we don't really have a culture of saving. And yet
we've got a culture of spending.
We certainly have,
debt.
on credit.
Yeah.
It's the case.
It's necessary more so now than ever, isn't it? The fact that the demographic changes are altering the way society is organised and how we actually pay for society.
It's actually been the case, if you look at Western societies compared to Eastern societies, the savings ratios tend to be far lower as a whole because we're more consumerist. However, if you look at the level of deleveraging, in other words, the amount of debt that people are paying off, whilst they're not saving because they're not able to save, the debt that they've had, and there's the mirror with the government as a whole, they're paying that debt down, which is the next best thing you can do if you're not able to save, at least paying down the expensive debt. And that's what they are doing. It's a shame that the report doesn't mention that. That's what's going on. And that is good news. But of course, the balance in terms of how much they should be saving, or indeed how much they should be investing, because that's the next level after when you've saved a little bit, those ratios never tend to be quite what the experts would have them be.
Now, let's have a look at this story about BP. International Herald Tribune looking at this major civil case for the oil giant. 5 states are bringing against charges, and also the Justice Department. I'm sure many will look at this or hear about this today and think, hang on a second, I thought we'd done this. Haven't they paid fines already? Isn't it over with? But obviously not.
Well, this one is for economic damages. So there were some fines for environmental damage, which were statutory fines, if you can put it that way. These are for the economic or consequential damages which result from the oil spillage. The problem with the US legal system, unlike, say, the British system, is that pretty much these fines can be unlimited. The consequential damages, the knock-on effects, loss of earnings for the states, the reparations effectively for the individual families, and the infrastructure costs of putting all of this right. You can imagine that by comparison to these 5 states, BP is quite a puny small company, and there is a danger that the many billions that will be sought by the American states may well kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
This article implies that they may have already settled on the major issues already and sort of agreed.
Yes, there is talk that there's negotiations going on and that they might not need to go to trial, and that's probably what will happen, because that's what tends to happen with these things. The most important thing for BP won't necessarily be the quantum of fines, it'll be the payment plan, it'll be how long they've got to pay that off, because, of course, there's no point, as I say, trying to kill the company, because you won't actually get any money in that case. And BT could rely on the fact that it is a separate subsidiary with, and that they can't impact the global operations. These tend to be all for reasons of exactly this, liability, they tend to be fenced off.
Moving on to the Financial Times now, which has I don't know, it sort of bypassed me. I don't know about you, the fact that Cyprus was having an election
European story
in the first instance, but now to find out that Mr. Anastasiades...
Well done.
Anastasiades, I shall practice. I mean, he's got a Herculean task in front of him now.
Yes, well, he's got to try and get some money out of the Europeans and out of the Germans and the rest of them in the EU, which is going to be pretty difficult because you're only little Cyprus.
Well, it's not only that you're only little Cyprus, it's also, you know, how Cyprus has been bankrolled, you know, for years and years, and question marks about that as well.
And it is actually a financial centre, and it is, of course, part of the European promise made amongst all the countries that they will have bailouts. But we're talking about 17 billion euros. Now, in the bigger scheme of things, it's a drop in the ocean, but they're still going to have to go on bended knee. Unlike Greece, they're not going to be able to create the same kind of fuss, and they're certainly not going to be able to unravel the EU, because God knows if they could, we should all be worried.
It'd be quite interesting actually this week, because we've got the Cyprus result, we're going to get the Italian result as well, which will be much more significant in terms of the EU debt crisis.
More colourful, the Italian result.
Hollywood, Alpesh, all over the papers, all over you know, social media as well. This is ChinaDaily.com saying Argo tipped as Hollywood counts down to Oscars. Obviously, we've now got the result. It did get Best Film, Argo. What did you make of the Oscars?
Well, Ben told me that he won it, and I tell you what's particularly interesting about this from a political perspective, and you mentioned China Daily, is of course they had significant help from the CIA in making of the movie, not just in the original operation in Tehran to extract these six individuals out of the country, but also, and the CIA often does this and people don't realise it, is that they do assist Hollywood with movies which concern intelligence operations. So it's actually been a good couple of years, because this wasn't the only movie. Zero Dark 30 was the other one which related to CIA operations. So they've had a good couple of years where the American government and the CIA in particular, after being bashed for quite a few decades, have come out looking pretty. And it's part of the American government's public diplomacy initiative to make themselves look good on the world stage, and it's certainly happening with China Daily.
And politics aside, which films did you like best of the current crop?
I haven't had a chance to see Lincoln yet, and I suspect I'm going to like that the most. Argo was good for a flight back from India, but I don't think it's
I'm
as
sure
great
Ben
as
wouldn't
people...
appreciate that comment, who you're obviously in touch with, Alpesh.
Well, I'll speak to him later. He's a sensitive soul.
Alpesh Patel, thank you very much indeed. Alpesh, of course, is CEO of Prifinium Partners. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you very much for joining us here at BBC World News. Of course, Sally and I will be back later if you're on BBC World News. And, of course, we'll be back tomorrow if you're on BBC Domestic.
Bye-bye.